Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the riots in France. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to start by reading this article. Yeah. If you can't hear me, move closer. I'm going to try not to project my voice so much. But the Daily Mail reported a couple of years ago now, the Daily Mail reported that a civil war is brewing. Serving French soldiers send Macron another chilling warning following earlier letter from retired generals calling for military action against Islamists. A group of serving French soldiers have published a new open letter warning Emmanuel Macron that the survival of France is at stake after the president made concessions to the Islamist ideology in France. The letter published in the right-wing magazine Valeurs Actuelles, Today's Values, late on Sunday, echoes the tone of a similar letter printed in the same magazine last month, which also warned that a civil war was brewing and called for military action against the Islamists. The French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, a close ally of Macron, slammed the letter as a crude maneuver and accused its anonymous signatories of lacking courage. The letter was signed by over 1,000 people, including serving military officers, 20 semi-retired generals that warned of the disintegration of France. Ladies and gentlemen, look at what is happening in France today. We have the disintegration of law and order in France. I'm not going to project my voice. I'm going to speak like this. So if you can't hear me, you're going to have to move closer. Now, what happened in France was that a young lad who had stolen a car basically tried to run a police check, and he got shot by the police. Now, there's obviously questions there about whether the police acted appropriately or inappropriately, and there's a strong argument to be made that perhaps French police should be equipped with a taser so that they have another option apart from a bullet to deal with criminals. But I watched the video. The young French boy tried to drive away. He was underage driving a car, and he didn't care about endangering the police officers. So it's quite probable that he may have been in a danger to other people as well. However, regardless of whether the actions were right or wrong of the police officer, regardless of that particular tragedy, the riots in France are completely and utterly disproportional to the occurrence. There are riots now happening across France, even after the police officer in France has been arrested. So there's no proportionality between the reaction and the event. But furthermore, and so the spark was on dry wood, because the immigrant population in France is a population made up of people that live by narratives of French resentment. They hate France because of France's past, and they hate France because it hasn't fulfilled their desires and their needs. They hate France because they feel hard done to. They've bought into the woke ideology of victimhood. And let's be clear, the riots in France that are occurring right now have different actors doing different things. There are organized criminal gangs that are just interested in profiteering that are taking advantage of this situation. There are opportunists who are using this as an opportunity to get a new DVD player and a new plasma screen TV. There are people that are on the streets because they are angry and they want to be part of something bigger where they are venting their anger. But there are also Islamists working these riots and taking advantage. Bring your camera forward, bro, so people are not pushed back. These different groups have different agendas. The one that you've got to worry about is the agenda of the Islamists, who are using these riots as a recruiting sergeant to their Islamist networks in France. Their jihadi networks are already well established and have been for many years, and that's why the French government now, as a normal matter of course, have the French army on the streets of France every single day, because that's how bad things have got in France. These Islamist networks have demonstrated their intentions by attacking a Catholic priest. Let me tell you the story. So, amidst these riots in France, an 80-year-old priest called Francis Palais was beaten up by Islamist rioters on the Friday just gone, the evening of June 30th. The priest was beaten, knocked to the ground, and as he was on the ground, an 80-year-old man, remember, the Islamists continued to beat him. Remember when the Islamists all complained when I pushed the elderly sheikh who pushed me? These same Islamists will defend the beating of this Catholic priest that occurred on the 30th of June. The priest was seriously injured and lost consciousness for some time. His attackers, these jihadi filth, these jihadi scum, this Islamist trash that attacked this Catholic priest, then went on to steal his mobile phone and graffiti his church, writing that Jesus is not God and Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. This filthy scum, these dogs of Islam who are using these riots in France to persecute Christians are the ones that the soldiers tried to warn you about. There are videos of Islamist gangs moving as units in trucks being transported to the front lines of the Islamist riots. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are seeing. Now notice the Islamists and their behaviour even in this park, ladies and gentlemen. Don't give them energy, buy your attention, focus on what I'm saying. They do this because they don't want to be exposed. Let me talk. Let me finish. So, ladies and gentlemen, it tells us that the security personnel were not wrong in trying to warn French society about these Islamists. They were right. They were right in what they were saying. And what we are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, what we are seeing is that Islamist networks are spreading these riots to Switzerland and Belgium, where they have also started riots. These Islamist networks are behind the agitation and they're behind the violence. And it tells us, ladies and gentlemen, something that is important for us all to recognize. Liberal secularism does not provide the sufficient identity by which we can tackle Islamists like this, because liberal secularism is ideologically blind to Islamists like this. Islamists like this are allowed to spread their poison in our society. They are allowed to spread their anti-Christian bigotry in our society. They're allowed to spread their anti-Semitism in our society. And liberal secular society cannot tackle them and will not tackle them. Brother, don't give them energy, just ignore them. Don't give them energy, just ignore them. That's why they're doing it, because they want to talk to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, individualism of liberal secular society cannot tackle the challenge we face in Europe. So we need to frame our struggle against Islamist dogs in another way, not appealing to the ideology of the Enlightenment, but by appealing to a muscular Christianity that has defeated Islamic jihad time and time again in the past, and will do again. So this is where I need you, bro.
You're not even a man.
Read in Proverbs 24, 11 to 12. Let me explain to you a biblical framework by which the church can do what the secular liberal state is not doing. Proverbs 24, 11 to 12, yeah. Proverbs 24, 11 to 12, and shout as loud as you can.
Deliver those who are being taken away to death, and those who are staggering to slaughter. I'll hold them back. If you say, see, we did not know this, does he not consider it who weighs the hearts? And does he not know it who keeps your soul?
Thank you. So, what do the scriptures command the Christians to do? Deliver those who are being taken to slaughter. So when jihadis are attacking Christian communities, as they are doing in Nigeria, as they are doing in Pakistan, as they are doing in Syria, as they are doing in Sudan, as they are doing in northern Ethiopia, these claims you can check yourself. Just Google persecuted church in northern Nigeria. Just Google persecuted church in Pakistan and you will see who's telling you the truth, myself or my Islamist hecklers. The scriptures say that we must not be passive in the face of the persecutor. The scriptures teach that we must be active in protecting those who are being led to slaughter. Read 1 Corinthians 13, 7 to 13.
Let's see that muscular Christianity. I want to see the muscular Christianity.
Notice how the Islamists behave.
Oh, I have muscle, all right. I want to see some muscular Christianity. Where is it, Bob? Where's the bite? No
Where's
bite.
the fight? The only strength you have is in that big beer belly you have. Big beer belly.
Come on,
It's not beer, it's good food. It's a good food belly, that's what it is.
1 Corinthians 7.
1 Corinthians 7:13, loud as you can.
And the wine. The wine.
7 to 13, loud as you can.
And believe it said
Go
God.
on.
And
Yet I wish.
flesh.
Loud, head up, speak to the back.
Yet I wish that all men were even as myself I am. However, each man has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried, to the widows, that it is good for them to remain even.
You're in
as
the wrong
an-
chapter, 13 bro, 13. 13.
Break it down for us. Break it down, Bob.
There you go, 13,
It's not easy.
7 to
You
14.
can't come here and insult Islam and expect us to be quiet.
Come on now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the Islamists are upset because I'm calling out Islamists.
No.
I said Islamist. Did anyone hear me say Muslim? No, you didn't, did you? But the Islamists are triggered because they're sympathetic to the jihadis who beat up the 80-year-old priest. That's why they're shouting at me, because I'm condemning an attack on an 80-year-old priest that was mugged, whose church was desecrated, and that's why they're upset. So just understand what you're witnessing here clearly. 7 and 13, loud as you can.
Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know
Stop at 13.
in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now, we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now,
Thank you. So as Christians, we're called to love. Now let me ask you this question. If your family was being attacked, is it love to be silent? No. If your family is being attacked, is it love to do nothing? No. So if as Christians we claim to love one another, can we do nothing when our brothers and sisters are being persecuted by Islamists like this? Can we do nothing, or should we act to defend our brothers and sisters? Thank you very much. It says as Christians, that we should act from love. And love does not allow our brothers and sisters to be persecuted and do nothing. And so I call to the Christians of France to organize yourself, to work to defend your society against the Islamists who are seeking to destroy your society. And note, ladies and gentlemen, note with your own eyes how when I condemn the Islamists, the sympathy of Muslims in the crowd is with the Islamists, not with their victims. Bear that in mind. So, 1 Corinthians 16:13. 1 Corinthians 16:13.
Painful, just try bear it. Come on.
There's some long words in there, like 4 or 5 letters long.
1 Corinthians 16:13. Loud as you can.
Literacy is low. It's low.
be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong.
Be on the alert is the apostolic instruction. Be strong is the apostolic instruction. Act like men is the apostolic instruction. When the church is faced by an existential threat, to be on alert means that we recognize the existential threat.
And do nothing.
Keep reading.
Pathetic church.
Read again, read again.
Are you going to go
Be on alert.
Yeah.
Stand firm in the faith.
Stand firm in the faith means that we don't allow ourselves to be bullied or intimidated by the people right here who are trying to bully and intimidate. Remember, they came to heckle because I condemned an Islamist attack on an 80-year-old priest,
That's all I'm doing.
and the sympathies of the Muslims in the audience have so far been with the Islamist attackers, not with the priest. So, we do not allow ourselves to be intimidated by them. Act like men. Well, by acting like men, it means we stand up to these Islamist trash. We stand up to them in every way that they bring the fight to us. If they bring the fight to us in argument, we argue back. If they bring violence to us, we fight back. What we don't do as Christians, when we act like men, when we be strong, is we allow them to persecute our brethren, to bully us, to attack us. We don't allow them the space by which they can push their Islamist ideology, in which priests are attacked and churches desecrated. Read it again, loud as you can.
Stand firm in the faith. Let all you do be done in love.
And then it goes on in scripture to say, let all that you do be done in love. So let's square the circle.
What about making enemies your
How do you act in love whilst fighting against an Islamist?
Are you going to make your enemies your footstool?
It means that you don't act from a place of revenge or from a motive of revenge. Our actions against the Islamist should be rooted in the fact that we are doing it because we love our brothers and sisters, not because we hate the Islamist. We must act to defend that 80-year-old priest who was beaten by Islamists, whose church was desecrated by Islamists. And notice, the Muslim sympathy is with the attacker. None of them have condemned the attack. So we'll read another verse. I'll answer questions later. So we're going to read John 17, 12 to 17. John 17, 12 to 17. So the guy wants to say, what happened in Syria? What happened in Syria was that an Islamist army invaded Syria and started killing Muslims. That's what happened in Syria. But the Muslims in this corner are so conceited that they want to blame the West for the actions of jihadi armies who cried out Allahu Akbar as they killed other Muslims, Yazidis and Christians. What happened in Syria was that ISIS invaded the Syrian state. ISIS that tried to wipe out and rape Yazidi women and enslave them and forced all of the Christians out of Mosul. But do the Muslims here blame ISIS? No. Who do they blame? They blame the Christians because they're conceited and because their heart is filled with hatred against the West, so that they even blame the West for the crimes of their own brothers and sisters. You ready? 17. John 17. John 17. John 17, 12 to 17. Loud as you can.
While I was with them, I was keeping them in your name, which you have given me, and I guarded them, and not one of them perished.
Louder.
But the son of the perdition, so that the scripture would be fulfilled. But now I come to you, and these things I speak.
Bro.
He said 17.
Did I? Let's have a look. Maybe I did. Oh, I've written it wrong. I'll tell you I did. So, one of the actions of our Lord was that when he had gathered all of his apostles together, was that he took upon a cloth and he girded himself around the waist, and then he washed the feet of all of his apostles. And he said to his apostles, "You call me master, and rightly so, for no servant is greater than his master. But now I call you brothers, and I give you this, a new commandment, that you love and serve one another." How do we serve the persecuted church? How do we love the persecuted church? How do we love the victims of the Islamist trash that you just saw in this corner? How do you love them? You love them by protecting them. You love them by speaking up for them. You love them by organizing yourself to take away the power and the influence and the toxic ideology that is Islam and Islamist ideology from our culture. You stand up to the jihadis who attack that priest. That's how you love your brothers and sisters. That's how you love your family. And there are these Muslims who came here and heckled me. Let's just remind you why they heckled me. Because I condemned an attack by a mob of Muslims who attacked an 80-year-old priest, knocked him unconscious, robbed him, and then desecrated his church. But apparently, to our Islamist dogs, if I condemn that, then I must be opposed. I must be opposed. That tells you the mindset that you are up against when you're up against the Islamist. There is no bottom to their hatred. There is no bottom to what injustice they will defend. Their heart is so full of hatred of the West that they will even blame you for the crimes of ISIS. There you go. They blame us for the crimes of ISIS. Muslims killing Muslims, but the West is to blame. Ladies and gentlemen, understand the mindset of those that are persecuting the church. They don't care about what's true or false. They don't care about what's right and wrong. They only care about winning. That is the only thing that they care about. And you must understand that. The secular liberal state cannot deal with the Islamists because it isn't dealing with them in France. It isn't dealing with them in England. It isn't dealing with them in Germany. It's not dealing with them in Belgium. And that's not my testimony. That's the testimony of over 1,000 personnel of the French security forces who write to President Macron and say that you are not dealing with the Islamist threat. and that Islamist threat is a danger to the French Republic. And now you're seeing the fruits of it right now on the streets of France. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to recognize something. You have all been brainwashed by the liberal media that wishes to hide from you what is right in front of your eyes. The Islamist ideology is what gave rise to the industrial raping of thousands of girls in northern England. The Islamist ideology is what has led to the tens of thousands of deaths of Christians in North Nigeria. The Islamist ideology is what has allowed over 10 Islamist armies to fight across the world in Africa, Middle East, and the Far East. And the solution, ladies and gentlemen, the solution is that you free your mind from secular liberalism, that you abandon the ideas of the Enlightenment and you re-embrace a muscular Christianity, the only ideology that has destroyed jihadi armies, the only ideology that has ever pushed the Islamist movement into retreat anywhere in the world has been the muscular Christian faith. That is the solution that we need in the West, and it begins with you freeing your mind from liberal secularism. And before I take questions, I'll just remind you again that every Muslim that heckled me today heckled on the sides of the Islamist. Wake up! The problem is bigger than you think. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? You've been heckling the whole time. Go for it. One question.
Okay. You said Christianity was about loving, alright? What's happening in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, sir?
Sorry?
What's happening in Nagasaki and Hiroshima during the Second World War?
Right. So these tropes that you hear, that World War II is created by Christianity, is based out of ignorance of European history. The brother, he simply doesn't know a thing about European history. But exactly, and yet here he is trying to pass commentary on the Christian relationship to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II was the result of Enlightenment ideology. It was the classical liberal world versus an Enlightenment cult called Nazism and fascism. They are all rooted in the same worldview. Secular humanism, the cult of humanity, the religion of humanity. It's just that they define the terms differently. It was like Protestants fighting Catholics when the British and the Americans fought the Nazis. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not Christian nations dropping nuclear bombs. It was a secular, liberal nation dropping nuclear bombs. The Constitution of the United States is not a religious constitution. It divides church from state. So before you pass commentary on European history, I would advise you read a book on European history. Next question.
Thank you.
Go on.
Thank you, you did well. Thank you very much.
What's your question, sorry? I never said Imperial Japan was a liberal democracy. I never said that I never included Imperial Japan in that question. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, questions going once, questions going twice. I can't hear you, bro. So, what about Israeli crimes against Palestinian Christians? So I want to say something very clearly. I'm not on the side of Israel, and I'm not on the side of Palestine. The Palestinian cause has been hijacked by Islamist terrorists who seek to annihilate Jews everywhere. It's in the charter of Hamas that they will wage war against the Jews until the end of time. That's what they say in their own writings. Of course he doesn't listen. People who ask these kinds of questions never listen. So the point is, as a Christian, I offer to you this assessment of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Israel is a threat and a harm to regional Christians in Palestine, and also to regional Christians in Israel, especially as the right wing of Jewish politics becomes more dominant. The persecution and the discrimination of Christians inside Israel is increasing, and the persecution of the Palestinians as a whole inside Palestine is increasing, and Christians are suffering because of Israel's policies. And as Christians, we must stand with the church against all of her enemies, and where Israel is an enemy of the church, then we as Christians must stand against Israel. But let us see the threat of Israel for what it is, a regional threat. But the Islamist dogs, those Islamist trash that launch rockets into Israel and have hijacked the cause of the Palestinian people, they are not content with destroying Israel. Their agenda is to spread Sharia law across the globe and the world. And they are also persecuting Palestinian Christians. So I say to you, if you say to me, what about Israel's persecution of Christians? I say to you, what about the persecution of Palestinian Christians by Islamist Palestinians? Why don't you condemn that? Stop using my brothers and sisters as a tool in your argument with Israel disingenuously when you don't give a shit about Palestinian Christians, because you're willing to look the other way when Islamist Palestinians are persecuting Palestinian Christians. The real place for Christians is to stand against all the persecutors of the church. But the bigger threat to the church are the Islamists in Palestine rather than Israel. And so our opposition should be balanced based to the threat that we face. Any other questions? Why don't you come here and debate, bro? Come here and debate. I'm not going to debate you shouting. Come here and debate. Right, let me take questions then. You've had your chance to debate. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Questions going once? Right, no one else is asking a question. Go on.
Bro, we can't hear you from there.
Islamic terrorism, it exists in the West before the creation of Israel. There wasn't terrorism.
Right, so let me address that point. Did Islamic terrorism exist in the West before the creation of Israel? Put your hand up if you've heard of the Barbary pirates. The Barbary pirates were the Islamist terrorists of their days. The Islamist terrorists of the Barbary pirates date from the 1700s and the 1600s. They predate the foundation of Israel. The last time jihadi armies marched in Europe crying out Allahu Akbar as they went to kill Christians was in 1918, when the Ottoman Empire sent its armies to fight against Christians. People who make this lie, ladies and gentlemen, that Israel created Islamic terrorism have never read a history book. They have only ever read Islamist propaganda. And I would suggest to you, brother, that you actually pick up a book of history and stop listening to Islamist narratives. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Would you like to debate?
The only point I'd like to make is when you said there was an army, or what did you call them? Islamic extremism that went through Europe. It's called conquering, it's called war. It's not called extremism, yeah? What were the Crusades? They were extremism, they were terrorists, right?
So let me reply to that point.
They were, just because of Christians.
I understand the point. Let me reply.
No, I haven't finished.
Or do you want to debate?
No, I don't want to.
We're doing questions. We're doing questions. I heard your point. I get your point. I'm going to respond to your point. Yeah, you're making the comparison of armies conquering lands, and you're saying Christians. So let me address that point. Let me address that point. Let me address that point. So, ladies and gentlemen, he says you can't call armies extremists. So let me ask him this question. Was ISIS an extremist army? Answer the question. Yes, they were an army.
Okay, that's according to you.
Are they an extremist? Answer the question. Now notice he doesn't want to answer the question. Notice he doesn't want to answer the question, but he also doesn't want to have a debate. He just wants to heckle from the side. So the question was, you can't call armies extremists because Christians had armies that conquered the Holy Land. Let me address that point. Firstly, the Crusades were reconquista. In other words, they were liberating Christian land from Islamist occupation. All of the lands that were conquered by the Crusades were lands populated by Christians. They were being liberated by Christians. And the Crusader states only survived because the indigenous Christians supported the Crusader armies and were part of the Crusader armies. When the Christians walked through Armenian villages, the Armenians, who were the indigenous Christians of the villages, gave gifts to the Crusaders and applauded them and called them liberators. And the foot soldiers of the Christian Crusader states were all indigenous Christians from the Middle East. It was Christians that allowed the Crusader armies to capture Antioch by betraying their Muslim overlords. And what's interesting is that the Muslims, under the rule of the Crusaders, never once rebelled against their Latin overlords, but the Christians continuously rebelled against their Muslim overlords. So what is that telling you about who were the better rulers of the Middle East? Let's be clear. Muslims in this park would describe ISIS as an extremist movement. But ISIS was an army, so the brother's point is invalid. You can call an army extremist. And when you compare the actions of ISIS to the actions of the Ottomans, they are identical. They are identical. The Ottomans did everything that ISIS did, and ISIS did everything that the Ottomans did. So if ISIS were extremist armies, then the Ottomans were also extremist armies. Any other questions? Questions going once? So the question is what, sorry? What's the question? What's the question? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the absolute level of liberal do-gooder ignorance. The brother has literally just said in front of you that an Islamist movement that expelled all the Christians from Mosul that tried to wipe out the entire Yazidi community, killing thousands of people, raping thousands of women, and enslaving thousands of people, is fake. There are some people in our society that are so desperate in their hatred of Israel and their hatred of the West that they literally cannot think straight. Christians lived in Mosul for nearly 2,000 years. ISIS kicked them out, and this brother says ISIS was fake. You've got to wake up, ladies and gentlemen. There are some progressive militants who are so fanatical in their politically correct ideology that they literally lie to try and push their politics. And this, ladies and gentlemen, should be opposed. This man's views are abhorrent. He is an apologist for rape and murder and genocide. That's who you're looking at right there. An apologist for rape, murder, genocide and slavery. Why are you not offended by what he said? If he was a neo-Nazi, you'd all be outraged by his racism. But he's justifying the ethnic cleansing of Christians. Are they good or bad? Based on what? Their exclusion of Christians. Why did they kick the Christians out? What did they say to the Christians? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I'll tell you what they do, because I know Christians who had to flee Mosul. And here's what the Muslims said to the Christians. You pay the jizya, you convert to Islam, or you leave. That's what they said. What's that got to do with Israel? That has everything to do with Islamic teaching. That, you see, he doesn't even listen. ISIS kicked Christians out of Mosul because of Islamic teaching. And the Muslim wants to blame Israel, not Islamic teaching, for what happened to the Christians in Mosul. He is an apologist for Islamist ideology. He is a sympathizer with Islamist ideology. And you should oppose him. And he's admitted he's a Muslim.
I'm a Christian.
You just said you were a Muslim. What are you then?
I'm a Christian.
You're a Christian. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Say Muhammad wasn't a prophet of God. Right, let's talk.
I don't want to be on camera.
But you're interrupting me and I'm trying to do a Q&A.
Question.
Yeah, but you're constantly going on. So make a choice. You either debate me or you let me do a Q&A. What do you want to do?
You can do a Q&A.
Right, so let's do a Q&A. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Move in, please. Move in. Move in, guys. Move in. Move in. Move in. Move in, please. Right. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Because what you heard there was how misinformed a person can be.